You know, when we hear about a potential invasion of Taiwan, the headlines are almost always about politics. But let's set all that aside for a second. What if we look at it as a different kind of problem? A puzzle. A gigantic, mind-bendingly complex strategic and logistical puzzle. Let's start trying to put some of those pieces together.
So, here's the big question, the one that military planners all over the globe are trying to answer. Is this actually the single most difficult military operation anyone could attempt today? We're not just talking hypotheticals. We're talking about the raw mechanics of what might be the most ambitious amphibious assault in history.
All right, to get our heads around this, here's our game plan. We're going to start with a really surprising piece of history, then jump to China's modern forces. After that, we'll look at why Taiwan itself is such a tough nut to crack, its unique defense strategy, and finally, the huge wildcards that could change absolutely everything.
To figure out what a 21st century invasion might look like, we're going to do something that sounds a little weird. We're going to go all the way back to the 17th century. Trust me, there's a fascinating historical blueprint for taking Taiwan that feels startlingly relevant today.
So meet Shi Lang. He was a brilliant naval commander, but he was also a defector. He switched sides to the Qing dynasty, and he carried a grudge, but more importantly, he had inside knowledge of his old allies who had just taken over Taiwan. So, in 1683, he leads this massive fleet, 300 ships, over 20,000 soldiers, and he actually pulls it off. He conquers the island, and it was his argument that finally convinced the emperor to officially make Taiwan part of the empire.
Now this is where it gets wild. Look at how history seems to rhyme here. The big challenges Shi Lang had to deal with, they have direct parallels today. You've got an unresolved civil war, you've got a foreign power messing with things, the Dutch back then, the US now. Insider knowledge from defectors was critical, the absolute need for control of the sea, and check this out, even the question of alliances. The defenders of Taiwan back then begged Japan for help, but Japan stayed out of it. Sound familiar? Today, a very similar question hangs over the United States.
Okay, let's fast forward to right now. China's potential invasion force is way more than just warships and marines. Beijing's strategy is what they call a whole-of-nation approach, and it blurs the lines between military and civilian life in a way we've, frankly, never seen before. So, of course, the tip of the spear is the People's Liberation Army. Any invasion would have to be this perfectly timed symphony of destruction from every branch: the Navy, the Air Force, the super-powerful rocket force, Marines, and the Army. This is the big, scary, conventional military power everyone knows about. But that's just the part of the force you expect to see.
Here's the key idea you have to understand. Military-civil fusion. This isn't just some fancy government slogan. It's a national strategy. It means civilian companies, especially in shipping and logistics, are legally required to be built and run from day one with a dual purpose: to support the military if a war ever breaks out.
And I mean, this is not just a concept, it is the law of the land. Back in 2017, this National Defense Transportation Law made it official. It legally binds every civilian ferry, freighter, and transport hub to the military's needs. It essentially creates a gigantic reserve fleet and supply chain hidden in plain sight, right inside China's massive economy.
So, what does that actually look like? Well, according to the PLA's own documents, the military believes it can call upon over 2,000 civilian transport ships. We're talking about everyday roll-on/roll-off ferries, massive container ships, the whole thing. It's a vast, secret weapon, a logistical armada ready to be activated at a moment's notice.
So, that's the attacking force. It's huge, but what about the place they'd have to attack? Let's flip the script, because Taiwan's geography is an absolute nightmare for any invader. It really is a defender's dream.
The best way to get this is to compare it to D-Day. The Normandy landings happened on a wide-open 50-mile stretch of rural beach. Taiwan? It has only 14, that's it, 14 small beaches that are even possible for a landing. And they're all jammed up against dense cities and have mountains and cliffs looming right over them. Oh, and unlike Normandy, Taiwan is already one of the most heavily fortified places on the planet.
And to give you a real sense of that terrain, get this number: 258. That's how many mountain peaks on Taiwan are over 9,800 feet tall. This isn't a hilly island, it is a natural fortress. That rugged spine running down the country is a strategic nightmare for any army trying to move inland and hold ground.
So, you add it all up, and what do you get?
A brutal combination of defenses. You have almost no good places to land, the cities are concrete jungles, the interior is a mountain fortress, the little islands offshore are basically giant bunkers bristling with missiles, and the whole country's infrastructure is built so tough it can handle massive typhoons and earthquakes. It is an incredibly tough target.
Okay, so because of all those challenges, Taiwan has adopted a very clever defense strategy. The goal isn't to go toe-to-toe with the much bigger PLA and win. No, the goal is to be a porcupine, to make the act of trying to swallow it so incredibly painful that the attacker just has to give up.
The porcupine strategy is what you call asymmetric defense. A smaller country can't match a giant tank for tank or ship for ship. It's just not possible. So instead, you invest in stuff that's designed to inflict a crazy amount of damage on the attacker. The entire point is to deter the invasion in the first place by making the price in ships, in planes, in lives unbearably, unthinkably high.
So how does that actually work? Well, think of it in layers. First, you have to survive the first punch. That means using hardened shelters, being mobile, using decoys to ride out that initial missile storm. Second, you make it hell for them to control the air and sea. You use mobile anti-ship missiles and air defenses that are hard to find and kill. And third, the final layer, you turn those 14 little beaches into absolute kill zones, with everything from sea mines to swarms of missiles to annihilate the landing force before it even hits the sand.
But, even after all this analysis, any prediction is just that, a prediction. The reality is, there are massive variables out there, true wildcards, X factors, that could throw everything out the window and decide the outcome.
And one of the most incredible unknowns comes from inside the PLA itself. For years, their own military journals have talked about a problem they call the two inabilities. It's a shockingly honest self-critique, worrying that their military might not actually be capable of fighting a modern war, and that its officers might not be up to the task of commanding one. That level of self-doubt, well, it puts a huge question mark over their real-world fighting ability.
And then there's the biggest X factor of them all, the United States. Would the U.S. get involved? How fast? With how much force? That is the single greatest unknown in this entire equation, because any direct American intervention would completely change the math for Beijing, transforming this from a regional fight into a full-blown great power war.
And that brings us right back to our original question, but with a new twist. An invasion might, on paper, be possible. But when you add up the terrifying geography, the porcupine defense, the PLA's own internal doubts, and the apocalyptic risk of a global conflict, the cost could be so catastrophic that a real victory is simply unwinnable. And that, right there, is the heart of the world's hardest military problem.